What's going on, y'all? Welcome back to the channel. So today's video is all about this coffee table here behind me, because for the last year, Jamie and I have been using bar stools as our coffee table. It was time to have an official coffee table in our living room. So I had some live edge maple slabs hanging around, some excess epoxy, and I wanted to try out some mortise and tenon joinery for the base. Everything came together, looks pretty good, I think. So if you want to see the steps that I took to make this happen, stay tuned. Alright, y'all, so I used some live edge maple slabs I got from my local sawmill, the Murdoch sawmill in Bunn, North Carolina. And the first step was to flatten all of these things because they had some warp and twist in them. So I used my router and my router sled to make that happen and get them nice and flat. Alrighty guys, so the slabs are flat. I'm going to use this one and that one for the top. These are about 1 5/8 inches thick. So that'll be a real solid top for the coffee table. And these smaller boards, these had a lot more twist in them, so I had to remove more material. These two smaller slabs are what I'm going to use to make the legs and the aprons. So I'm going to square these up. I'm going to cut these live edges off of them, see how much lumber I can get out of them, and that is kind of going to determine what the legs are going to look like and how long the aprons and all that kind of stuff is going to be. So I'm just working with what I got, but that's the next step. Y'all will see me using my track saw a lot in this video, but I just use it to rip the live edge off of these maple slabs so that I could take them to the table saw. I usually do 2 passes on thicker stock. As you can see, the first pass pretty much went all the way through, but then I use the second pass to clean it up. I then took those smaller slabs that I was talking about over to the table saw, and I ripped them down to about 2 1/4 inches wide. That way I could use them as the aprons and the legs of the table. Once the smaller slabs were ripped to width on the table saw, took them over to the miter saw just to get them to rough length. The legs were about 16 inches long and the aprons were 25 and 35 respectively. Once the cuts were made at the miter saw, I took them to the planer to get everything to the same thickness, especially for those table legs so that I could laminate them properly. I had 8 pieces cut at 16 for the legs because I needed 2 to laminate together to make 4 legs. I had 2 short aprons and 2 long aprons. Don't mind the burn marks, they'll get cleaned up later. Glue up was fairly straightforward, just saturated one side with glue, put the 2 legs together. I tried to match up the grain of the boards as best I could on the ends to get the most aesthetically pleasing look as possible. As the legs were gluing up, I ripped the larger slabs to the approximate width, and as you can see, this time I just decided to plunge it all in one, and I got a crazy amount of burn marks and I had to go back and clean it up. That's why I take multiple passes most of the time. I just forgot this time. I use melamine for my epoxy molds. That's what this white material is. So once the slabs were cut, I cut the melamine to the appropriate size to create the epoxy mold. I used Total Boat 2-to-1 and Total Boat thick set on this project. I asked them if you could use both types of resin, and they said as long as the 2-to-1 cured first, you could use the thick set on top without any problems. So mixed up some 2-to-1 first, using some black diamond pigments to tint the epoxy. And I start off by pouring a small 1/4 inch layer, and then you'll see me using a foam brush to kind of coat the edges of the live edge, and that just prevents bubbles from coming out and air escaping on your subsequent pours. Once the epoxy was poured, I grabbed my little heat gun just to pop all the bubbles. You can use a blowtorch as well. I just like using the heat gun because it was cheap and you can control the temperature. The good people over at Total Boat were generous enough to send me out some of their new thick set product. This is a 3-to-1 epoxy resin that allows you to pour from 1 to 2 inches thick at a time compared to 1/4 of an inch using the 2-to-1. So far, this has been a great product. I'm super happy with it. I'll definitely be using it on future projects. And if you guys want to pick some up for yourself, you can go to Total Boat or JamestownDistributors.com and use code BLUELINE for 20% off of your order. So use it. It's good stuff. As the epoxy cured, I went over to my table saw and cut the tenons for all of my aprons. So I just cut them at 3/8 of an inch, just raised the saw blade to 3/8 to get the correct size for the tenon. Once the tenons were cut, it was time to cut the mortises out, and I set the mortise so that there would be about 1/4 of an inch reveal on the front facing edge of the board. So the middle portion here that I'm marking with the pencil, that's 3/8 of an inch wide by about an inch long. So I started out by using a 1/4 of an inch downcut bit. This downcut bit is from Tools Today. I'll leave a link in the description. I use it on CNC projects most of the time, but this worked great for chopping out most of the material of the mortise prior to using the chisels to clean it up and get it nice and sharp. It was really nice to use some hand tools on this project, so once the majority of the material was removed from the mortise, I just used my chisels and cleaned it out. This was a little bit more of a time-consuming process, but overall it was kind of relaxing, and the epoxy was curing anyway, so I had some time to kill. If you're wondering why I have another leg butted up against the current piece that I'm working on, that's just so that when I was using the router, it had a larger face to reference off of, so that I had a better guide when I was removing the majority of the material of the mortise. It just made it easier running the router back and forth. Glue up was pretty straightforward. Just put some glue in the mortise, some glue on the tenon, and I glued up 2 legs together at one time instead of doing it all at once. This just made it a little easier, made sure I had everything nice and square, and just prevented less of a mess in the long run. Use this little straw tip here to clean up the glue. I didn't invent this, so I'm not a genius or anything, but it works extremely well to get the majority of the glue out of those corners, and makes it so that you don't have to sand as much during the final phases of the project. Anytime I have an epoxy project, I like to line the edge with some silicone. It just prevents a lot of run out and makes cleanup way easier. So once I removed that, it was time to remove the tabletop from the mold. I just removed the screws, took a mallet, and started hammering away to get all of that melamine out of the way. Once the tabletop was removed, I used my router sled one more time just to take a small little pass off, just to remove all that excess epoxy and get everything nice and even. Once the excess epoxy was removed, it was time to cut the table to the final dimensions. Ended up being about 40 inches long by 30 inches wide, and the track saw made easy work of it. I wanted to throw some C-channel on the bottom to help keep the slabs nice and flat, so I cut them to length with my reciprocating saw. Worked pretty well, and I didn't really have anything else to do that with, so it worked. Then I needed to drill some elongated holes. You'll see why in a minute. Just put some oil on the drill press, used a 3/8 of an inch bit, and drilled the holes. I needed to route some grooves in the bottom of the slab for the C-channel to sit in, so I just set the depth to 5/8 of an inch with my 1/4 inch bit and cut some grooves using a straight edge there that you see clamped to the workpiece, and then I just cleaned it out, vacuumed it all up so that the C-channel could sit in there nice and flush. When the hardware store doesn't have the proper size screws, you just gotta make it work. So took them over to the bandsaw, cut them to the proper length. I needed 6 of these to hold the C channel to the bottom of the tabletop, and this made quick work of it. I then drilled out the 3/8 of an inch holes in the bottom of the slab. This is going to be for some threaded inserts that you'll see here in a minute. So I just started the holes with the C channel in there so that I knew that they were nice and straight, and then I used a piece of blue painter's tape on the drill bit so that I knew that my depth was correct. I then threw some 2:1 epoxy resin on some threaded inserts and screwed them into the bottom of the tabletop. These threaded inserts are going to be what holds the C channel to the slab using those screws that I just cut a few minutes ago on the bandsaw. Once the threaded inserts were installed, I then installed the screws to hold the C channel to the bottom of the slab. Now the threaded inserts and the screws, they just have a diameter of 1/4 of an inch. So the elongated holes on the actual metal C channel will allow for proper wood movement. Once that was taken care of, I then just sanded my life away. The tabletop, I sanded all the way up to 400 grit. I'm going to be using Odys Oil finish on this table. So at 400 grit, you'll get a slight sheen. The higher the grit, the more sheen you'll get. Now I'm all about some chamfers, so I just put a quick chamfer bit into my cordless router and gave this tabletop a nice edge profile. I then drilled out some holes on the bottom of the legs just to put some leveling feet in there. I use a Forstner bit and then a regular drill bit to get these inserts for the feet to properly sit at the bottom. I ended up going in with a hand chisel at the end just to make the hole a little bit bigger. That way the feet were completely recessed in the leg and you didn't see them sticking out at all. I used my Stanley block plane to put a little edge profile on all 4 corners of each table leg, and I like the small little subtle look that it gives, even though they weren't perfect like a router bit. Then used a biscuit joiner just to cut some slots on the inside of the aprons, and this will be used to hold the Z-clips that will hold the tabletop to the base. I'm using Odys Oil on this project. I've used it on a few other table builds, and this stuff is great. Goes on easy, protects the wood. It's very, very easy to apply. So I'm a big fan, and I plan on using it on all my future table builds. But if you guys have more questions about the application process and all that kind of stuff surrounding this product, go check out Odys Oil's website or their YouTube channel where they have other how-to videos so that you can get a good grasp on how to properly apply it. Once I had all the finish applied and it had some time to dry, I brought it in the house just to save it from the dust. And all I had to do was install the Z-clips, and that was it. So the table is done. It looks outstanding in the living room. I mean, I'm loving the grain pattern on this. There's all kinds of great figure. There's some curl in it, there's some spalting. The black epoxy looks great too. So we're super happy with this build, and I hope you guys enjoyed it. Alright y'all, that's a wrap on that one. That coffee table turned out sweet. We are super happy with it, and we are very happy that we now have a functioning coffee table in the living room. So if you guys liked the video, give it a thumbs up. If you want to tell me that you liked it, leave a comment. And if you're not subscribed to the channel already, I don't know what you're doing, because more build videos like that shop projects, CNC projects, backyard chicken garden stuff. All those videos are gonna keep on coming. So if you wanna see them, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell so that you get a notification when I upload a new video. And if you guys wanna see some up close and personal pictures of the coffee table, make sure you follow me on Instagram at Blue Line Woodworks, because that is where I post all the day-to-day shop stuff. All the final pictures of every project that I build goes to that social media platform. But thank you guys. Thank you so much for the support, and I will see y'all on the next one.